In just over a decade, the Conservative Party of Canada has lost 4 elections, picked 3 new leaders, and turned on 2 of them when they failed to become Prime Minister. Tonight, the party votes on Pierre Poilievre's future as leader of the Conservative Party at their convention in Calgary. So today, we're going to look back at the path the Conservatives took to this point and consider whether Poilievre can keep his party united behind him.
I mean, I think it's a big deal, obviously, anytime a party changes leaders, because the leader has such an impact on the direction of the party, on the success of the party, on what kind of party it is.
That's our pal, Aaron Wherry, senior writer with the CBC's Parliamentary Bureau. He's been covering Ottawa for nearly 20 years now.
I think, though, in Stephen Harper's case, it's that much more profound because, for all intents and purposes, he's the only leader the modern Conservative Party had up till that point.
It was 2015 when Stephen Harper stepped down after losing the election to Justin Trudeau.
The disappointment you also feel is my responsibility and mine alone. But know this for certain.
He had been Prime Minister for nearly a decade.
So when he steps aside after the defeat in 2015, there are questions about where the party goes from there. Will it deviate from sort of Stephen Harper conservatism? Will it act differently? Will it choose different priorities? Will it manage some of the issues within the Conservative Party differently? You know, the questions are just that much more profound in a situation like that.
Conservative candidates flooded in to offer their own answers to those big questions.
I think there were 16 candidates in total. A couple of them dropped off the ballot towards the end.
That's Melanie Paradis. She's a Conservative political advisor.
Everyone was putting their name in.
There were a bevy of Harper-era cabinet ministers like Stephen Blaney, Chris Alexander, and Kelly Leitch, who campaigned on screening newcomers to Canada for their belief in Canadian values. There were social conservatives like Brad Trost and Pierre Lemieux. There were more moderate conservatives like Michael Chong and Erin O'Toole, who Melanie Paradis worked for. We'll have more on him later. But there were 2 main frontrunners. One was the Libertarian Quebec MP Maxime Bernier, who was probably best known at the time for leaving top-secret government documents at his Hells Angels-linked girlfriend's house.
I think that we must have more freedom in Canada, less government. We must go back to our core values as conservative, and I'm ready to do that.
And the other was a reality TV businessman, best known at the time for co-hosting Shark Tank.
How could you forget Kevin O'Leary? He was indeed a frontrunner.
O'Leary came with this Trumpy resume.
This is policy now. This is not reality TV. Mm-hmm. This is not a columnist creating excitement, and I did it very successfully, I might add.
He was bombastic, calling the Conservatives losers before deciding to run for them.
If I don't deliver a majority mandate to the Conservative Party, fire me.
At times, it was kind of hard to tell if his heart was really in it. He took time off the campaign trail to hawk O'Leary Fine Wines on the American home shopping channel QVC.
So, O'Leary Wines is being launched on QVC April 26th, and then it's going online, and then at the end of May, we're launching single serve. So when you go to a rock show or you go to a baseball game, football game, single serve of wine in a plastic container, never been done before.
And eventually, after the ballots are already printed and mailed out to Conservative members, he calls it quits.
I know exactly where I was when I got the phone call that he was dropping out of the race. Like, it was such an impactful moment. I was getting my hair shampooed in a salon when I got a phone call with my head literally in a sink. I had gone days with, it's embarrassing, but when you're in campaign life, like, you're so busy, and we were coming right up to the debate. And so I was getting my hair done. And and then Kevin O'Leary dropped out. Immediately you were wondering, okay, where is he throwing his support? What's he going to tell his supporters to do? Because it's a runoff. It's you want people's second ballot vote. So especially when you have that many people in the race, obviously you aren't going to win on first ballot when there's 16 candidates. You're going to win by getting down ballot support.
O'Leary threw his support behind Maxime Bernier. And so with the support of the other frontrunner consolidated behind him, it looked like the race was Bernier's to lose. But there was another contender who had his own strategy to come out on top, in the ranked ballot voting.
There was such a large number of people running, and some of them with big personalities, but even ones that were less well known had certainly a niche and a following in the party.
That's Hamish Marshall. He ran the Saskatchewan MP Andrew Scheer's campaign.
We knew we needed Andrew to be in a position to be able to attract a lot of second-place votes from all of the other leadership candidates. And so we built a campaign around that.
Marshall is a numbers guy. And when the first ballot of election night came, he knew what numbers he was looking for.
All right, this is going to be really interesting here. Because
21.82%.
Bernier is below the 30% figure.
Well, for me, there were two moments, right? The first was when the very first results came out, which had Bernier, I think, at 27 point something. It was 28%. I can't remember exactly, but it was under 30. And Scheer was at 21 and a half, maybe. And my modeling had always shown that for us to be able to win, Scheer had to be sort of 21, 22% on the first ballot, and Bernier had to be under 30%. And Andrew turned to me and looked, and he's like, I think this is good. And I was just had this big smile on my face.
Maxime Bernier would be in the lead for 12 consecutive ballots.
The winner will be, but this has unfolded like I can't remember another leadership candidate campaign that won this many ballots, but I certainly can't remember anything where somebody led for 12 ballots and then had the potential of losing on the 13th.
Yeah.
It's remarkable.
And then on the 13th round of voting,
and the next leader of the Conservative Party of Canada with 51% of the vote.
The prochain chef, Andrew Scheer.
Next leader, Andrew Scheer.
winning a leadership race with a little over 50% of the vote after 13 rounds of voting. It seems like a bit of a tricky position to be starting from.
It was a year-long, exhausting campaign. It resulted in some divisions within the party. I think every time we do a leadership race, it has the potential to create divisions and kind of factions where you're squaring certain teams off against each other.
It's, been more than 20 years now since the Conservative Party, the new modern Conservative Party of Canada was founded. And, Harper was able to hold it all together, especially in power. But it was not a foregone conclusion that was the inevitable thing after, with a new leader and everything else. So party unity was a big goal on our to-do list.
But at least one person isn't interested in that unity. Maxime Bernier quits the Conservatives about a year later, and he goes scorched earth, calling the Conservatives morally corrupt and launching his own party, the People's Party of Canada. The PPC doesn't win a single seat in the next election, but Andrew Scheer doesn't emerge victorious either. Though he wins the popular vote and is able to reduce Justin Trudeau's Liberals from a majority to a minority, he does not become prime minister. And pretty quickly, the knives come out.
You lose an election, there's going to be criticism. That's fine, and that's fair, and that's not unreasonable. Some people are public in their criticism, and some people are private in their criticism.
Throughout Scheer's leadership campaign, he was often presented as a Stephen Harper continuity candidate, but nicer.
You're either described as the smiling Stephen Harper or Stephen Harper with a smile. What's your take on that description?
Well, I think that's a fairly accurate description. One of the reasons that I don't mind it at all is because it wasn't our policies that cost us the last election.
But in the general election, facing off against Trudeau, Scheer was dogged by questions about his social conservatism.
He really struggled with questions about his own personal politics, about his position on abortion, about his position on same-sex marriage. And the Liberals, cunningly or cynically, threw those issues right at him in the campaign. And he really struggled to sort of explain his own social conservatism and how that would impact or not impact how he governed.
For that. Millions of Canadians have a different position on this issue. And like millions of Canadians, I am personally pro-life. And it is okay in this country to have...
You have said that you support LGBTQ rights, but you won't march in a pride parade. What's the big deal?
Well, there's just lots of different ways to show support to a community, and I show my support by...
After Scheer lost, prominent conservative Peter MacKay said that, quote, it was like having a breakaway on an open net and missing the net, and that Scheer's social conservative values were a, quote, stinking albatross.
With respect to the comments about the stinking albatross, look it up. It's a reference to an old literary poem I read as a kid called The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, where a man who was on a ship had an albatross put around his neck and he couldn't get rid of it. He didn't put it there, but he struggled to get rid of it. And that was the issue, that Andrew Scheer was labeled as being somebody who might reopen this debate, and he wasn't able to move away from that particular narrative. And that narrative wasn't begun by him, I assure you. I regret the way people have interpreted it, how it was torqued, how it was misconstrued, and it might have been a little raw at the time. But I think as conservatives, if we want to win, we've got to be honest with ourselves. We have to address some of the shortcomings that Canadians...
Melissa Lantsman, now the deputy leader of the Conservatives, but then a Conservative public affairs strategist, wrote an op-ed in the Globe and Mail titled "The Conservatives Can't Be Stuck in the Past on LGBTQ Rights," which included the lines, "Tweaking words here or there will not bring less scrutiny to Mr. Scheer's position on the issue. Relying on better communication, as some MPs have mused, will not do much good when what you have to communicate is not saleable." There were stories on the news with Conservatives in Quebec openly calling for Scheer to step down.
Quebec candidates are clear. We need a change, says Marie-Claude Fournier. Scheer lost the moral authority over his team, and Quebecers, says Michael Miquel. Sources tell CBC News the whole night was like that, filled with devastating comments about the Conservative leader.
He had his shot. I was one of the people who supported him for leadership, but right now the party and our leader didn't deliver what we were supposed to achieve in the last campaign, and I think now the better thing is to step down.
They weren't the only ones. Conservative strategist Corey Tenike started going on TV calling for Scheer's head too. His name might be familiar to anyone who paid attention to the most recent election, when he went public with very sharp criticism of Pierre Poilievre.
So you think Mr. Scheer should resign?
I think he should resign and run again for his job. If he's confident that the party membership backs him, that's the way to test that.
Also, Conservative power broker Jenny Byrne told CBC that she did not think it was, quote, in the best interests of the party for Andrew Scheer to remain as leader. Hamish Marshall again.
Mr. Scheer resigned as leader. He told me the same thing privately he said publicly. That being leader was something that he'd wanted to be, but, he also needed to be with his family. And so he ultimately decided that, continuing as leader and having a fight, because I'm sure there would have been, had to go through a leadership review at very least, and, God knows what else was coming. Or focusing more on his family, and he made the decision for his family. And as his friend, it's not something I'm ever going to fault him for.
So in 2020, there's another Conservative leadership race. This time, the pool of candidates is a lot smaller. And the two big names are Peter MacKay, the guy who called Scheer's social conservatism a stinking albatross, and Erin O'Toole, who'd run against Scheer back in 2017. But this time, his campaign looks a bit different.
Most of the lefty radicals are also the dumbest people at your university. That's part of the problem.
Yeah, he comes out of the gates talking about how he's going to take on cancel culture and the radical left. He runs as a quote-unquote true blue conservative. He says that Peter MacKay would take the party to the mushy middle. Instead of the sort of centrist, moderate conservative that I think people in Ottawa sort of understood Erin O'Toole to be, now he's running as a populist conservative in some ways.
So it was more of just not being liberal light. I think that was a big thing. Like, are you too close to the Liberal Party in your views, or are you more conservative?
That's Fred Delory. He was Erin O'Toole's campaign manager.
Every one of our leadership races is about a fight for the heart and soul of the party. What does it mean to be a conservative? So for that, O'Toole was true blue. That was our narrative, and it worked incredibly well. And he ended up winning that leadership.
Well, his campaign to become leader said many of the right things. Ultimately, it was successful. It shouldn't come as a surprise, but the members of the Conservative Party are pretty conservative. and that was attractive, and he was able to win the leadership around that.
But then after he becomes leader, Erin O'Toole starts to pivot away from that true blue conservatism.
It doesn't happen all at once, but he starts to kind of go back to the moderate conservative, or something more like the moderate conservative that I think people thought him to be. And the sort of big moment of that is when he comes out and presents a climate platform. The Conservative Party had dined out on opposing the carbon tax that Justin Trudeau's government had implemented. And Aaron O'Toole had said he was going to, scrap the tax.
Yes, I'll kill the carbon tax and get pipelines built and then work with the provinces on their plans to reduce emissions.
And he introduces a climate plan that, in a convoluted way, includes what is essentially a carbon tax.
Well, look, there's certainly the carbon issue. I can't remember what we called it during the campaign. There was some policy out there that would have upset a lot of Western MPs.
Well, I think his convoluted and complicated and frankly bizarre carbon credit scheme where you could pay taxes and get gift cards for a bike or something, which seemed to both be endorsing a carbon tax and making it unbelievably complicated and creating a bureaucracy around the need to administer it, was just a symbol of how poorly, how things had moved in the wrong direction.
I think there was a belief that at the time that carbon tax was here to stay and it would be very difficult or near impossible to remove, which was clearly wrong.
And now to think that now, 5 years later, we live in a world where we had a Liberal government rescind the carbon tax, shows, I think what a misreading of that situation was.
The problem for him at that point is this is a big surprise to many people in the Conservative Party and in the Conservative caucus who are surprised to see they suddenly support a carbon tax, essentially. And while there may have been some logic to reaching out to voters who want to see a serious climate plan, voters who maybe are not dyed-in-the-wool conservatives, the actual conservatives in the Conservative caucus don't all love this idea.
And maybe all could have been forgiven if Erin O'Toole had won the 2021 election. But he didn't. Like last time, the Conservatives won the popular vote, but it was Trudeau's Liberals who got to form government. And the gears to oust the Conservative leader start turning yet again. Here's Melanie Paradis.
So there were a number of different individuals that kind of worked together to raise questions in the media about Mr. O'Toole's leadership. There was like a petition at one point in time.
That petition was launched by Saskatchewan Senator Denise Batters. It called for an expedited review of O'Toole's leadership.
On behalf of Conservative activists and members from coast to coast, we started this petition because we don't want to see this party ripped apart again. When we're divided, the Liberals win. Under Erin O'Toole's leadership, the rift in our party is growing.
O'Toole kicked Batters out of the Conservative caucus over that petition, but the pressure didn't disappear. Jenny Byrne wrote in the Toronto Star that O'Toole had fractured the party for the first time since its creation, and that if he stayed on as leader, the coalition would continue to unravel.
There was, of course, social media rumblings. There were people who would go on the news and do the shows, the political shows every week, and question openly whether or not he had what it took to be the leader. The same exact people did this with Andrew Scheer. And then there were events like the convoy.
So Aaron O'Toole, kind of like Scheer, seems for a little while like maybe he can hold on somehow. But the questions about his conservatism and his pivot are still there, and they seem to come to the fore as the Freedom Convoy is rolling into Ottawa. There are questions about whether his position vis-a-vis the convoy, whether he's fully supportive of the convoy. It all sort of seems to come to a head, and finally the dissidents in caucus force a vote. And he makes this sort of last-ditch effort to say that the party needs to sort of stick to the sensible path and not go down the path of anger and division. But ultimately, caucus decides he's not the one, and he's dispatched at this kind of remarkable moment of the convoy rolling into Ottawa, which sort of perfectly sets the stage for Pierre Poilievre.
After the break, why Pierre Poilievre could get the elusive second shot at becoming prime minister. The next Conservative leadership race was hardly a race at all. Pierre Poilievre was the clear favorite to win, and he took it on the first ballot with a decisive majority.
Ladies and gentlemen, j'ai des résultats. I have some results. It's my great privilege to announce the results. Nous avons un nouveau chef. We have a new leader. The next Prime Minister of Canada, la prochaine Premier Ministre de Canada, the Honourable Pierre Poilievre and Anna Poilievre.
He went to Conservative members and he made them feel good about being Conservative. He was unapologetic. He held his head up high. He, landed some good shots at Trudeau. He made longtime Conservative members feel very good about being Conservative, which is in many ways the first job of a leader.
He's a very talented communicator. He's very direct. He's very unapologetic. He's entertaining, I think, to a certain respect. People will obviously debate what he says, but I think he's very effective at saying it. I think the other thing is he's very unapologetically conservative. He's not running as moderate. He's not running to necessarily broaden the tent with different positions that are outside the conservative orthodox. He's running hard on conservatism. And I think if you look at his leadership campaign and then his leadership, I think you can see sort of elements of Maxime Bernier, elements even of Kevin O'Leary, and elements of Erin O'Toole's leadership campaign of this kind of aggressive conservatism and, no apologies. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to take on Trudeau. I'm going to be tough. I think all those strands that had been kind of out there and hadn't really coalesced into something or behind someone sort of all come together for Pierre Poilievre.
As Abacus data pollster David Coletto sees it, Poilievre was able to really unite the party in a way that the last two leaders could not.
One of the first things I think he was successful in doing is removing any oxygen that Max Bernier's People's Party had left, that he brought together, the full range of conservative perspective, small c conservative perspective, populist right perspective in Canada, and did it around his leadership. And so he spoke to, the folks that might have supported the convoy in Ottawa. He spoke to people who felt that the Trudeau government wasn't focused enough on developing the energy sector or growing the economy or focused on affordability. So he really brought together, the full range of conservatives in a way that I think certainly Erin O'Toole struggled to do, in a way that maybe even Andrew Scheer struggled to, because there wasn't as much excitement for the previous two conservative leaders. Where I think what was different about Pierre Poilievre is he was so good at tapping into the mindset of many conservatives and many conservative-oriented Canadians, and brought many new people into the conservative tent who agreed with his theory or his thesis that, much of Canada was broken, that the institutions were preventing people from achieving the goals they wanted, whether that be buying a home or, having a good job or feeling safe in their communities. All of that, I think, stitched together a pretty strong conservative universe.
It also doesn't hurt to back a winner. And Poilievre sure did look like a winner there for a while in 2023, and according to Coletto, especially in 2024.
Our last poll of the year had, the Conservatives ahead by more than 20 points, the largest lead we had ever measured for any party at the national level.
But we hardly need to remind everyone what happened next. Justin Trudeau resigns, Donald Trump becomes president, starts talking about annexing Canada, Mark Carney becomes prime minister, and Pierre Poilievre loses the election. He loses the popular vote. He even loses his own seat. If we're just following the pattern here, he should get the boot. The knives should come out. So where are the knives?
So I think what has in part kept Pierre Poilievre there is a couple things. One, I think parties also sometimes reach a point where they say, hey, we keep replacing leaders. Is that the right idea?
There is this tendency to be one and done. So you've had your chance to run in one general election. You lost. Therefore, you're a loser. And we want to get rid of you and replace you with someone else. And it's so... It obviously isn't working for us. Like, I think that it's time we give somebody a shot and more than just one election.
But I think the bigger piece of it is that amongst Conservatives, Pierre Poilievre is still fairly popular, very popular. And despite the fact that he blew a 20-point lead effectively, he also had the best result the Conservative Party has ever had in terms of popular vote. He won more of the popular vote in 2025 than Stephen Harper won when Stephen Harper won a majority in 2011. It's just that Mark Carney's Liberals won more votes. And I think the strength of that result, in part, has kept him there. Although I think that you've seen misgivings, I guess, within the Conservative Party, in the floor crossers, in Matt Genereux stepping away, that seemed to kind of speak to the same thing. So I don't think that Conservatives are necessarily all happy, but the paradox of the 2025 result for the Conservatives is, as I say, they blew a 20-point lead and lost a campaign that it seemed to be theirs, but they also still managed to pull off a fairly remarkable result as these things go.
I think our coalition, always to get enough people for us to win, is a lot of hard work. It's pulled together, but I think Mr. Poilievre, more than anybody in a very long time, is uniquely suited to do that because he has expanded the Conservative coalition so much. If we had the same coalition that we'd had in the Harper era, or even in other elections reasonably recently, we wouldn't have gotten 41% in the 2025 election. We wouldn't have picked up more than 20 seats. We would have ended up going further and further back because the old coalition wasn't enough, and we might have lost some of those people to Carney as well.
I think what was important about that coalition in 2025 for Mr. Poilievre, it was different than we had seen in the past. Two factors are important. One is that from a generational lens, we did see in post-election surveys that the Conservatives did far better among younger Canadians, particularly younger men, than the party had in the past. I think that coalition being younger, being more working class, being folks, as Mr. Poilievre said, campaigned on boots, not suits. He stitched together a coalition that resembled a lot of what we saw in the United States that backed Donald Trump, that has backed populist parties in Europe, which is this feeling that you're being left behind, either economically or culturally, and that he was going to be on your side.
Despite the gains, despite the new people Poilievre brought into the party, including younger people and working class people,
what we see in the polling today is that is largely held together.
There's still a problem here.
It's everybody else outside of that who has lost any affinity, I think, for Mr. Poilievre, which is his real challenge in trying to grow the Conservative Party.
As Abacus data put in a report this week, Poilievre's strength with the new Conservative coalition is inseparable from his weakness with everybody else. 79% of the Conservative base Coletto polled rated Poilievre's performance as leader as excellent or good. But amongst those who are potentially open to the Conservatives, that figure drops to 29%. And with everyone else, it's just 11%.
It is a paradox. I mean, on one hand, the party base, like the people who voted for Pierre Poilievre to become leader, know what his tone is. His tone has always been the same. That's what they like. That's what they want. They don't want him to change that. But the paradox is when you look to the general electorate and what they want and how that differs from the Conservative Party base.
I think Mr. Poilievre has produces a reaction with people who are never going to vote Conservative. That is, they really dislike him.
Hamish Marshall, who helped rally support around Poilievre for the leadership review, says the people who don't like Poilievre were never going to vote Conservative anyway.
I reject the idea that the people that dislike him are people who are, or the people who for whom he is the most polarizing, are people that were really in the Conservative voter universe to begin with.
But still, heading into the vote tonight, what are the choices before the Conservative Party here?
So, I mean, technically, it's a vote up or down on whether to have launch a new leadership race. But I think any party facing this is kind of having to gamble one way or the other. One is they stick with Pierre Poilievre and see where things are in a year or 2 years or 3 years. The other would be a gamble to say, let's launch a new leadership race and see if we can find somebody better suited to this moment. Leadership races are always risky. They can be divisive. You sort of never know where they're going to end up. But if it doesn't seem like Pierre Poilievre can reclaim the moment, then maybe that's the path you go down. I mean, the conflict for the Conservatives right now, I think you can just look at the polls, which is Mark Carney has a huge advantage over Pierre Poilievre when it comes to a direct sort of leadership comparison. Pierre Poilievre's negatives are quite high. When people are asked who their preferred prime minister is, Carney comes out way ahead. But on just a party vote, on which party people would vote for, the Conservatives are still sort of neck and neck with the Liberals. It's still very close. And so, you know, how do you read those numbers? Do you look at those numbers and say, stay the course, we can win the next election if we just keep on doing what we're doing? Or do you look at that and say, if we could find another leader, we could win the next election?
And even if the Conservatives did give a new leader a shot, maybe someone less polarizing than Poilievre, could that person keep the whole new Conservative coalition on side?
When I think about who else could replace him, I think the question is, yes, there may be some candidates who could appeal to those right now who are not open to voting Conservative, but could that same person also appeal to, say, the entirety of the current Conservative base? And that's the paradox of Conservative politics, is that you have to be able to hold your coalition together, which is very diverse. It includes social conservatives, cultural conservatives, economic conservatives. It includes conservatives in Quebec and in Alberta who differ greatly on issues around energy and climate, but may agree on issues like immigration and cultural policy. And so if you moderate yourself, if you try to find a leader who's more like Mark Carney, does that weaken the distinctiveness of the party brand and its offer? And does it create space for those more conservative, populist parts of the party to either stay home or maybe seek an alternative? And there's evidence of that playing itself out in Alberta, you know, at times, or in the 21 election, you saw Max Bernier get close to 1 million votes. I think much of them would have been Conservative supporters otherwise. And so you can't take for granted that Conservative coalition just stays together naturally. I think Pierre Poilievre is the thing that's helping hold it together. But at the same time, really does limit his ability to appeal to a broader audience outside of it.
We asked Hamish Marshall if he thought all the new people Poilievre's brought to the party would stick around without him.
I don't want to find out. I mean, what he's done is incredible. It's a sea change. If it continues, the pattern continues, it's the biggest change in Canadian politics for a very long time.
For now, the Conservatives are widely expected to stand by their man. He might get that elusive second chance at becoming prime minister that the last two guys did not. When Stephen Harper got 84% in his leadership review after his 2004 election loss to Paul Martin, he stayed on, won the general election in 2006, and was prime minister for almost 10 years. On the other hand, when Joe Clark got just 66.9% support in a vote on reviewing his leadership in 1983, he stepped down as leader. Poilievre himself has said that he has no magic number in mind for the convention. But even if he gets a big ringing endorsement from the party this weekend, his future is not guaranteed.
It's important to point out, this is a membership vote. So Conservative Party members showing up to that convention are going to vote on his leadership. But it's still worth wondering where the Conservative caucus is. We've seen 3 departures, 2 crossing the floor to the Liberals. The Liberals are now 1 or 2 seats away from a majority. If a couple more people leave the Conservative caucus to go to the Liberals, not only does that change the election horizon, but what does that do to Pierre Poilievre's leadership? Because he may have the party, but if he doesn't have the caucus, if too much of the caucus defects, is it possible it could still fall apart, a year or 2 from now?
All right, that is all for today. Erin's going to be back on the show on Monday to break down what happened over the weekend, and we'll talk about what came out of the first week back in the House of Commons, too. Front Burner was produced this week by Joytha Sengupta, Shannon Higgins, Matthew Amha, Lauren Donnelly, Kevin Sexton, and Mackenzie Cameron. Our intern is John Costello. Our YouTube producer is John Lee. Our music is by Joseph Shabison. Our senior producers are Imogen Burchard, who produced the episode you just listened to, and Elaine Chow. Our executive producer is Nick McCabe-Locos, and I'm Jamie Poisson. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll talk to you on Monday.